location which might be maintained at its best for quite a while in the property bubble collapse maybe becomes a bit tenuous in the geopolitical oil shock, at least at the level of maybe overseas internet, if not the local telephone system yet. In this one, you know, a lot of those things can be switched off for maybe not very long, but for a critical period where you sort of completely lose stuff. Think about that, what was raised of dumpster diving or skipping, as we call it. That, in a way, building that as a culture works very well, maybe in the property bubble collapse as a way of people getting by, whereas in your scenario, it's sort of like there's something that you could quickly do in the crisis is go to bins and get all the stuff out of bins while everyone is going to the supermarket, hoarding, buying food. There's bad things happening in the supermarket, but no one's out of the bins. Get that food and then give that out to people. They don't know that it's come from the bin. You know, and then, you know, maybe after a few days, you know, that opportunity is actually evaporates. You know, it's only there as a sort of like a window of opportunity. But if you don't have that sort of knowledge, or someone doesn't have that knowledge, then they sort of don't know how to do that. So you can see these sort of crossovers where something is actually a sort of a useful building pattern for a sort of incremental or even viral growth. And in another situation, it's just a passing window of opportunity where you can do it, and then it becomes sort of fairly irrelevant. So the understanding the mainstream central disaster planning strategies is a really good one, because to know what the authorities are likely to be doing, at least if it doesn't go chaotic and they're complete headless chooks. But if you look at something like a super cyclone in the northwest of Western Australia, or a bushfire through the sort of the hills country, or in our region, up to a certain level of catastrophe, you can expect the centralised systems to sort of more or less do what they're planning to do. Beyond a certain scale, they still always break down. And then beyond that, they start making things worse. But when you get a novel thing like an earthquake, you know, the Pickering earthquake that I remember, or the Newcastle one, even more dramatically, or a super storm hits Fremantle that I don't know whether there's any planning for anything like that. Probably not. So you can't actually expect the disaster response systems to actually sort of really work at all, other than down at the SES worker deciding he's going to do this and he's talking to his mate, which is a bit like just empower people in the community doing stuff. So that's you know, very important to understand with, you know, disaster events, that as they get very large or outside of the framework of planning, the response to them actually becomes dysfunctional rather than helping. And again, it's not like because people are bastards. You know, the cops are there and told, no one can come in or out because this area has been declared, you know, like serious, there's people dead here and security. If you come out, you know, you can't get back in. And certainly this is what happened in the big bushfires in Victoria. You know, people were sort of locked out. And when people evacuate, you know, they need to understand that they will not be allowed back in, which can be sort of incredible. So you know, understanding those sort of dynamics for particular disasters. Now, I have a lot of experience in that in relation to bushfire planning. That's been 30 years of my work, even though I've never been through a massive bushfire directly. But I thought because we're in Freo, you know, I'd sort of choose something, and hopefully it didn't seem too implausible.
Yesterday.
No. Yesterday it didn't. just concluding, did everyone get the sense that there is a lot of crossover between those very different? So that's really the essence of scenario planning, that you have a sense of the plausible scenario, which is sort of logically consistent and plausible, and that there's multiple ones, and you don't know what you're subject to. But inevitably behind that, there's some grand assumptions that you're still making. And what I've tried to do is nest those grand assumptions in energy descent, and then even take it further and say my brown tech scenario, which is quite a big sort of thing to sort of get your head around. But so I'd encourage you to do more of that scenario planning in groups, both formally and informally, at the household level. And I think there is a balance between what some people call disaster porn, catastrophe porn, and the sort of hard-nosed work that the SES and the military, they do this sort of stuff all the time. Its job is to how to think about what you do when things don't work out. But we've uploaded all of that into some sort of professionals do that. And as Nicole says, download that here. And then there's that fantastic aspect of that, well, if we do that and it doesn't happen, what did we lose? Versus, what if we're not prepared for that? What do we lose? And I just sort of finish with another story from my workshop in Mexico, where my teacher at the end was to say, you don't need to believe that my four scenarios are likely to come about. That was the big ones, including the lifeboat and the Perth steward, to put some effort into preparing for them. And then I said, it's a bit like insurance. You don't have insurance on your house because you believe there's a likelihood that your house will burn down. You have it because you know that the consequences, if it did happen, is so severe. And they started laughing. Said to my interpreter, what's the problem? And he said, look, middle-class Mexicans, mostly don't have insurance. They don't believe the insurance company would ever pay out. And they rely on their strong social networks and connections. So I blew it that way.